Right, let's move on now then to our planned communication strategy. And our first question is from Mr. Mohi, which he's already asked about the timing, and you're ready to answer.
Yeah, well, I'll give it a go. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and councillors. The timing of the Matahiwi Marae Have Your Say event was done in coordination with one of my team. We went out ideally looking for the same time from all venues, but the time was given to us for Matahiwi as 4 p.m. So I can dig a little deeper, but that's the best I've got at the moment. So this, now that we've been through the lengthy and important process of working out a consultation document and all the supporting documents that go with it, the job is to get it out there into the community. And this is all about telling the story of the activities that we plan to undertake. So the comms strategy that you've got in front of you, as brief as we could make it, really is about just promoting our plan, putting out there those key issues, the financial and rating impacts, and just encouraging as many people in the region as possible to interact with that information, to receive it, and to comment on it, obviously. So I'm just going to draw attention, I'm not going to go through it in absolute detail, I just want to draw your attention to, point 8. Having the plan, having our plan, which will be obviously sent out to all households in the region as a part of our place. We'll also then support that in itself with a shorter animated movie, which will be just over a minute in length. I'd love to show it to you, but it's being worked up as we speak by the animator, and I will get a version of that to you as soon as I've seen it and I'm happy with it. But that's under action now. We'll have library displays as we have done in previous years. We'll have our social media approach, which is getting, I must say, stronger and stronger, given a new team member that we've got on board since late last year. The Have Your Say interactive public events, they're not going to be the public meeting type of approach that we've staged in the past. They will be more interactive. There'll be a bit more of a sort of a round-robin event of different, sort of pods of information. And we'll encourage people who attend those events to interact with a number of staff and who'll be present, and yourselves as councillors, to really keep an open dialogue going and not be just a seated, we present, you receive. An example, it will be, there's going to be no PowerPoint. I think that's sort of not helpful to engagement. We'll simply be really wanting to talk to people and engage with them as much as possible at those events. And how we advertise those will be print, radio, we'll use email, we'll use digital portals through Google TV and media releases, and we expect there'll be some our friends in the media who are here, some media reporting on this as well. You've got, to me, I think you've got most of the information that I was able to provide when I wrote this paper, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Hewitt.
Drew, a couple. What on earth is Giggle TV is my first question.
All right, those are digital portals that are situated, I think there's about 60 of them throughout the region. They're TV screens that sit in cafes, fish and chip shops, hair salons, petrol stations, and they, they're sort of quirky little humorous images pop through, as well as there's a whole lot of paid content, and ours is one of those paid content. So they've done us a deal to give us a good bit of exposure using those portals, and I think they're quite popular because they are a bit quirky and a bit funny.
Okay, and just two more. Have you double checked that this isn't, with Central Hawke's Bay one isn't clashing with the District Council one like last year?
Yes. That was your question from one of the previous workshops, and I did check with John Freeman, and he indicated that their consultation with the public would be quite minor this year, and in fact, didn't make any.
So there's no clash. Would you consider doing the CHB mail advertising on the 21st of April as well, given that the meeting's the 23rd, if we've gone to all this trouble and expense so far?
Yeah, sure.
Just reminding people, a couple of days before would be helpful.
Yep, happy to do that.
Further question? Mr. Mohi.
I presume that the Matahiwi one, they'll be called onto the marae as a group, so it'll be sort of at the gate, so that would probably take half an hour or so. So probably in part explains the 4 o'clock start.
We've been advised that there will be a brief porphyry to commence the proceedings. So yes, there will be some protocol, but I think it'll be as without being insensitive, it'll be as brief as they're comfortable to do.
And hopefully we'll have our Chief Graham back by that time.
Indeed.
Councillor Dick.
Yeah.
Order.
Where does the 19,000, which is only external cost, isn't it? Where's that funded from?
I think it's in part funded out of the.
There's normally a budget under the Project 840, which
That's
is
right.
for governance, specifically around annual plan / long-term plan community
So
engagement.
It's from existing.
Yes.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Further questions? Someone happy to move on that basis? Someone happy to move? Councillor Pipe, seconded Councillor Scott. Thank you. Wish to speak?
Getting the information out is always a difficult one. I've been through a number of long-term plans, in previous on the previous council that I was involved in, and it's always a challenge, I think, to get the information out there and encourage people to interact with council. I think this is a good plan. I just hope that the public kind of respond to it and turn up at these meetings. I think the publication that you put together, I want to congratulate you and your team, Drew. The publication that goes out to all households is very good, and I think I'm looking forward to seeing the follow-up in the advertising, and particularly the animated movie. But well done, and I guess all that we can hope as a council is that we inform the public a lot more about what we actually do on this council, because that's always been a challenge, I think, to make people understand what the Hawke's Bay Regional Council actually does out there. It's very complicated, as the Chair said before. It's a huge raft of activities that we actually conduct here. But let's hope that this goes some way of bridging that and getting feedback coming our way. Thank you.
Seconder. No further speakers. Thank you, Councillor Pipe. I'll put the motion then. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. Thank you. Let's now, thank you, Mr. Broadley. Let's now go to item 10 on page 21. State of our Environment 5-yearly summary report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, Council. Pleased to be able to bring you the report this morning. It's a fairly substantive document, as you will have seen, and it represents a significant effort by the science team and the comms team to bring it together. So shortly, Stephen's going to take you through a bit of a presentation that sort of the pithy points out of the report, and the key contributors and authors to the document are in the room, so we're happy to take questions around it. And just perhaps before we get into the detail, just to clarify that this document is a non-scientific but technical document that reports back to our community on the state and trends of our natural resources. So it's deliberately written in a style that's not supposed to be technical. It's supposed to be an engaging document that provides people with information that I'm sure they're all very interested in. It looks at historical information, and it'll tell the community about whether things are staying the same, whether they're getting better or whether they're getting worse. And where possible, it'll give a view on what's driving those changes. It's not the role of this report, though, to set out a process or make recommendations on what needs to change if things need to change. That's what a subsequent policy process would start to deliver. So this brings together a snapshot, a view of how are things looking, which way are they going. So that's the thrust of the document. So look, no further from me. Stephen will run you through the presentation. Like I say, there are key contributors in the room, so certainly very happy to take questions after that.
I'm sure there are a few. Fantastic document, I might say, to kick things off. Any questions, particular questions?
Stephen does have a presentation.
Presentation, okay.
All right, thank you, Ian, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the summary of the summary of the summary, if you like. I have 6 slides in which I draw attention to some of the specific items which are improving, staying the same, or getting worse. But in the paper that you have in front of you, there's slightly more detail given, and again, there's more detail in the report itself. So the state of the environment monitoring is something that we do as an organisation, as all regional councils do in New Zealand, because the RMA requires us to. It's the focus of quite a lot of the activity of environmental science, both in collecting data and in analysing that data and presenting it in technical reports. The summary report that you have in front of you is a collation of a wide range of technical topics, and it deals with a summary level view of the state and trends in those environmental variables that we monitor. Now, some of what we monitor, we've been monitoring for many years, as Ian indicates, but some of what we do at the moment has never been done before. So where we have no comparative data from previous periods, we're just looking at the state. Where we have comparative data from previous periods, we look at the trends, how things have changed. Whilst you have the summary report in front of you, there will be technical reports which analyse the information that is presented here. So very much what's in the summary report is an observation of the state and trends, and the technical reports will provide in-depth analysis. The areas in which we do monitoring can be split down into 5 major groups. There's the climate and air, which includes air quality, surface water, so streams and lakes particularly, groundwater, land science, which is anything that isn't wet on the Earth's surface, and then in the coast out to our territorial limit. So just some selected findings, and you'll see these discussed in more detail in the summary report. So good and improving things that we've experienced in the last 5 years: air quality on the Heretaunga Plains. And in particular, we've seen a major change in pollution days that are experienced in Hastings. In 2008, we had 28 pollution days, and that had dropped to just 5 days by 2013. That's a significant change, obviously. In Napier, similarly, a drop of 5 pollution days in 2008 down to just 1 day in 2013. In rivers, we have 11% of our rivers measured phosphorus levels improving over that period of 2008 to 2013. But this is actually lower than the national rate of improvement. So elsewhere in New Zealand, things are improving more rapidly than they are in Hawke's Bay. Our Escherichia or E. coli levels are improving in groundwater as well. And all of the sites that are measured for E. coli were compliant in 2013, which is a significant improvement. And one of the major successes in the experience of nitrate nitrogen in surface waters and groundwaters has been the catchment of the Taharua, where that's been improving, probably as a consequence of land use change in that subcatchment in the period from the last summary report to the present summary report period. And the photo that you see there is an example of riparian planting in the Taharua that the landowners have undertaken in that catchment. Many things that we monitor have actually not changed very much at all. And so, for example, things that we have no control over, such as annual rainfall totals, they're pretty similar to the 30-year average for the last 5 years, except during the 2012-2013 drought, when they were obviously significantly lower. Coastal water quality is also similar to the water quality that we saw in the last monitoring period. And land cover is fairly similar to 2007, but we note that stock numbers have increased over the period 2007 to 2012. And there's a photo of one of the beasts that we monitor when we're looking at water quality in surface streams. It's a spiny-gilled mayfly. Now, some things are poor or declining. So poor means that their state at the moment is observed as being poor, or declining, it means their state has changed from one period to another and it's getting worse. So more Hawke's Bay streams are getting muddier than is the national experience. We also find that many of our lower catchments are often poor habitats for aquatic bugs, similar to the one you saw on the previous slide. 8 of our 19 native fish species are threatened, and about only 2% of the original wetland extent remains in the region compared to pre-settlement by Pākehā. Stock exclusion from streams is poor in parts of the Heretaunga and the Tukituki plains, and that is something that is contributing to sediment loads in rivers. And Olsen phosphorus levels are not ideal under some land uses. The detail of that is provided in the report. And there are areas of the Ahuriri estuary which have elevated levels of heavy metals. So these are things that we will continue to monitor in the future, and we expect and hope that we'll see improvement in those as policies that councils put into place and other organisations might undertake will potentially lead to improvements. And I'd like to invite questions from those in the room.
And considering I jumped the gun before, I will now ask Councillor Scott.
And we pick up specific questions on the actual document, which is great reading. If you refer to page 11, 5 years is probably not enough of windroses to tell you if there's a trend, but I've noticed in the last couple of years a shift in the predominant direction of the wind, with an increase, funnily enough, of more easterlies. And it raises to me questions about whether this is just a phase of the various oscillations, but its impact on coastal erosion. Is there a trend that we're going to be seeing more easterlies, and what are the results that we can expect from that?
So I'd like Kathleen Kosniak perhaps to answer that question, if you wouldn't mind, Kathleen.
It's quite possible. I mean, I haven't examined that in detail, and you do, like you say,
Sorry, need to come up.
Oh, okay.
So we can
Just wondering, do you want to
use
get
the
all?
microphone.
Should we get all the team just
Yeah.
come up front?
Yeah.
So why don't you all just come up? You might need to grab a chair and just cluster around the table.
Use the microphone.
And use the microphone.
It's quite possible that you are seeing more easterlies because we are in the IPO phase. We're in the negative phase, which means we tend to get more La Nina type environments, and that tends to bring us more northeasterlies. So that's been since about 1999, we've kind of been in that phase. So over that sort of last 10 or so year period, we probably have, it's quite possible that we have experienced more in the way of easterlies.
Are you expecting that, just sort of casting out to the future, what's the relevance to coastal impacts of these?
Well, that's generally those cycles last about anywhere between 15 and 30 years, so we're possibly halfway through or almost near the end of it. So yeah, it's hard to say when that regime might change.
Councillor Barker.
I want to cover the last area bullet point. The areas of Ahuriri have elevated levels of heavy metals. Is it correct that the major cause of the heavy metals in the Ahuriri are from unpainted zinc roofs, which are water is washing off the roof into the stormwater, therefore into the Ahuriri? And if this is the case, could this be readily remedied by asking the owners of the property to paint their zinc roofs? And if it is, why don't we just do it?
Right, thanks for your question, Councillor Barker. Unfortunately, Ollie, the author of that section of the report, isn't here today. He's on some field work at the moment. Otherwise, Ian would like to.
So I'd just add a comment that that area in particular of the estuary is at the outlet of the Thames Tyne stormwater system that's managed by Napier City Council. At the moment, that's in the heart of a consent process to consent the discharge of that stormwater into the estuary. All of those very sorts of issues that you raise will be traversed in the consenting process, because I would imagine zinc roofs are a contributor, but there are also a number of industrial areas through that site that contribute other contaminants from the various industrial sites into the stormwater that will also be picked up and managed as part of that consenting process. But you're right, there are some obvious remedies that those exercises should draw out and see put in place.
So is it possible the heavy metals could be contributed to the Iron Māori events?
Councillor Barker, follow-up question. You were rudely interrupted there.
I say rusty Māori. Anyway, but you haven't really answered the question. You've hinted at it, but it seems to be. I'm asking: is there some immediate, obvious causes, such as zinc roofs, which are unpainted, which are causing the zinc to come down the stormwater, which if we go through the long way, we have to then set regulations and do that. But if we know it's a problem, why don't we just go and ask the owners of them to paint them?
Sure, and look, the short answer is I don't know. Unfortunately, the person who wrote that part of the report isn't here. Certainly happy to go digging for that information and provide it.
I appreciate that.
Sure.
Councillor Dick.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman. 8 out of 19 native fish species threatened. To what extent would this be due to predation from introduced trout species?
Okay, now, I don't know whether Sandy would like to answer that one. Sandy, you'd have to come to the microphone.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I'm not really the person to answer that in detail, but the major problem for those fish species is usually the habitat loss. Yes, there is some predation problems as well, but I think the main problem we have to focus on is migration and habitat to protect the fish species. So this is actually the major for the ones that are threatened.
And habitat loss, how's that manifested?
It is mainly, especially in the lowland areas, which are connected to the sea, and those are actually the streams that are majorly modified. They don't have the habitat that they need to spawn and live in and hide away. So that's one where we have to focus on.
Is that because of silt?
This is definitely one of the contributing factors. It's also just straightening and just the loss of habitat they'd use to feed in and hide away, just like habitat structures like logs and because they are quite uniform, the channels.
Thank you. Councillor Balfour.
Like trout, I think humans are an introduced species in New Zealand, and they've done quite a bit of damage, haven't they?
Yes, since you fellas are
Anyway, looking at page 91 and 93, there are some comments here about the groundwater quality in the aquifers, and there's references to nitrogen, nitrates, and on 93, there's a discussion of iron and manganese, 23% of sites exceeding the maximum acceptable value for health guidelines, 50% for aesthetic, 28% for aesthetic on iron. If I were bottling water in the Heritonga aquifer, should I be concerned about those numbers, or should I just market my product as mineral water?
So, look, I'll jump in there. I guess ultimately that's for the bottler and distributor of that water to make that decision. They'll know the content and the quality of their product, and how they choose to market it is over to them.
Seriously, there's a seriousness to the question. I mean, are these 23% exceeding a maximum value for health? Is that something to be concerned about?
Well, look, Stephen and Mark might have a view, but I think the key bit in there is that in the introduction, this is stuff that naturally occurs in our groundwater, so it's nothing we can manage. If the question is, does it provide a health issue if you're bottling it and marketing it overseas, I guess that's probably a food safety or food health type question, and that the people conducting that work would have to consider that before they exported it. We certainly provide that information and make it available to them. Can we manage it and change it as a council? No, we can't. It's really a buyer beware and an FDA or a food safety consideration for the distributor or marketer or producer of that product to make the decision.
Councillor Pipe.
Yeah, the report talks about species under threat, but I just read in the paper recently that there's a whole new range of spiders that have been found. So, I mean, we obviously have species that are becoming extinct over time. I mean, when you're looking at, and we know that there are ones that are under threat, but are we finding a whole lot of new species? Are we discovering new species and adding to the total number as we move through time?
Yes, absolutely. In many situations, both in New Zealand and overseas, the number of species being discovered is continuing. This is particularly the case where environments that previously weren't explored or weren't accessible are being now accessed by people. And I'll give you the example of the number of bugs that are found of different types in areas of Australia where in remote parts of Australia, the amount of exploration has been fairly low until quite recently. And particularly with the advent of significant, extensive mining operations in parts of Western Australia, the number of bugs being discovered in those new areas is rising, and species are being discovered all the time.
So in other words, the whole story about species under threat is maybe not as bad as we would think?
Well, I guess it depends where you're starting from. The species that we know of that are assessed and their significance determined are often classified into those which are under threat and those which aren't threatened. And then if we don't know about a species, it has no classification because it's completely unknown. When it's discovered, it's initially the extent of its range and its activity is usually poorly known, and only gradually as scientific studies are completed does that become apparent, and then a threat classification can normally be made, and it's in those situations that it might become a threatened species where it previously didn't exist, or it just may be found to be very prevalent in many situations, and the level of threat is deemed to be quite low.
Thank you.